Hello and welcome back to the Animorphs YouTube channel. We're going to review Megamorphs, the Andalite's Gift. This is the first of the Megamorphs book and there were 4. This is number 1. There's 2, 3, 4. Yeah, you get it, you can count. This book was interesting in a number of ways and we're going to go through plot point by plot point and catch the pigeons of this one. First, a couple of little bits. We've got an interesting cover for this one. Excuse the sort of degraded state of this book. These books were released about 20 odd bloody years ago. It's an interesting front cover. We've got the 4 Animorphs. There's Tobias. It's not great. It's very 90s. It doesn't hold up to today's standards of a graphic design. But I'm not going to hold that too much against it. I think there was a second design. It was certainly similar to the In the Time of the Dinosaurs one, I think. It gets better as it goes on. I love these 2 covers here, but for now we're dealing with this pile of shite cover. There's no axe on the front because, as is mentioned inside this one, he isn't technically an Animorph. He says, I'm not an Animorph, I just work with them. So we're not at the stage where Axe calls himself an Animorph. And speaking of Axe not being quite an Animorph, each character has their little face there. Well done, camera, for focusing on that. I approve of your work. So Jake, Rachel, Tobias, Marco and Cassie each get their own little picture. And then we get to sad little Axe's chapters where there is no such thing. They were so... Obviously, they released these quite quickly. I think it was a month apart at a time. And they obviously hadn't had time for a designer to design Axe. Of course, by the time the next book came along, we did get a design that was redone quite soon after. So it's quite obvious they were rushing things at this point. We don't even have a small face picture of Axe. But that's not anything to do with the plot. I'm just going over some extra stuff that made me titter before I read all this. Also, there's a nice little card in the middle of all this. Yeah, great. Right, okay, let's get on with the plot. What there is of it. So, the thing about Megamorphs is that it went from character to character. It's the first time we've done this in Animorphs. Each character has their own little narration bits, which is good in a way. We get it more as we go throughout the series in several different books, most noticeably the Megamorphs books. And it does come with its benefits. You get different perspectives where necessary, and you get different characters doing different things in different places without having exposition handed down to you later on in the book. It does come with its downsides, and we see it pretty much straight away in this book. I will say straight off, this book is in 2 halves. The second half is a roller coaster thrill ride of excitement and fun. The first half is the opposite. It's a drabbling pile of shite, let's be honest. It was really hard to read this book at first. The first half of it, I needed to motivate myself to read it because it was awful. Awful, awful, awful. The worst we've had of Animorphs so far by a mile. But the second half, there were quite a few notorious moments, iconic bits. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're talking about the plot. The first half of the book, when we had the changes of narration, it was basically to re-establish something that we learnt from somebody else's perspective. Just going over old ground, and it seemed pointless. Completely pointless. I think that there were a couple of bits where we found out something. Like, oh, revelation. And then in the next chapter, we got the exact same revelation rediscovered in a less exciting way. And it was hopeless. It was completely hopeless. And we also get characters acting out of character at the start of this book, most notably Marco, who, as we have discovered... I'm going to put this back here, by the way. As we've discovered by this point, Marco is supposed to be the clever one. One of the most notable things at the start of this book is that Marco is acting rather out of character. We've established so far that Marco, for all his ridiculous sense of humour and his jokes and his japes, when it comes to serious matters, he changes. He becomes very cold, very logical, and he tends to have the better ideas and works on those ideas. What we don't usually get is him sneaking into parties in mouse morph in order to overhear someone dissing him. Now, in a sort of way, it fits his character, but not to the point where he's taking risks. That seems distinctly anti-Marco. And not only do you get that, but you also get Axe playing along with this because he didn't want Marco to go alone. Oh, Marco's about to jump off that bridge. Can't let him do it alone. Oh, fuck off, Axe. That's just ridiculous. And yeah, so the book got off to a bad start. Marco, it just acts like a complete idiot, which isn't Marco's character. That's Cassie's character. Well, if she had a character. So they go into this party. Jake and Cassie are there. They scare this girl and decide to chase her. Why? Why would you... There's already enough risk to this story, and they decide to chase her. What's going on here? These kids are tasked to save the world. They've just destroyed the Kandrona. They've had their first major victory. They've had enough missions to find out that we are not fucking around. And what are they going to do? They're going to fuck around. And the worst part of all this, the worst part of all this travesty at the start of this book is Jake's reaction. Remember, Jake is the leader here. He's the one who's supposed to say, stop your bullshit or you're fucked. By me, not by them. You're fucked by me. Not literally. And what does he do? He knows that Marco has done this bollocks. He knows that Axe joined him. He knows that for the past, 6 or 7 books, people have just gone and done their own thing without any consequences, without any real discipline. And what does he do? At this, probably the most egregious one so far. Nothing. Nothing. Jake does nothing. And that is gopping leadership, Jake. First couple of times maybe it's understandable, but now it's happened 5 or 6 times where at the start of these books the characters just do their own fucking thing no matter the risk to themselves or other people. This is the point where you as a leader have to stand up and make the point clear that they are not to do this. But unfortunately for Jake, he's always setting the bad example, and he's never putting his foot down and telling people to stop doing these sorts of things. These Animorphs are loose bloody cannons at this point, and they're going to get themselves killed. It's only a matter of time. Obviously, we're in fiction land and regular rules don't apply, so maybe there's a bit of leniency in that regard. But Jake, really, this is where he needed to step up, and he did not. He loses major points here. Almost as many as Marco for being a complete travesty to begin with. Right, rant over. We find the Velik. They don't know the name of this thing at first, and it comes across to them as this big entity that's never really described the shape of this thing, but as we find out later, it probably doesn't really have a natural shape. It's just a conglomeration of all these miniature insect things, and it makes these sort of big blades that swoop out, and it's got loads of mouths and eyes sticking out of random places. It's just a fucking garbled mess of deadliness, apparently. But it's not out there to kill the animals, it's out there to capture them, as we find out later in the book. Now, it's an interesting concept, this Velik. At first, it didn't seem to make much sense. It didn't make sense towards the end, either. But it became a bit more interesting once we find out there is a collaborative effort of lots and lots of little insects come together and find morphing energy. Let's discuss the logic behind this creature. Point number 1. This thing is from Saturn. I have issues. I have a lot of issues with this point. Firstly, I don't like the idea of aliens coming from elsewhere within our solar system. I like the idea of them coming from mysterious places that we've never heard of. So that bugged me a little bit, but that's the most minor of points here. What is Saturn? Saturn is a hellhole. Think of literal hell. It is nothing compared to the hell that is Saturn. Look in any science textbook or any website about the surface of Saturn. It doesn't really have a surface. It's made up mostly of hydrogen and helium. 75% hydrogen, 25% helium. And as you get lower down, it becomes liquid hydrogen, which, if I can remind you, is extremely bloody cold. And below that is liquid helium, which is even ruddy colder. Or is it warmer? They're both just fucking cold. The winds of Saturn blow at about 1,000 miles an hour. Do you realise how quick that is? A bug the size of a flea, as these things were, a bug the size of the flea, if it's going at 1,000 miles an hour, it will just blow fucking through you. No joke, you would be torn to shreds if you were anywhere near the surface of Saturn, which we're not. Bear that in mind. But at the same time, these are living creatures living on Saturn where the winds blow at 1,000 miles per hour. Firstly, what are they eating? Because as we established in this book, these things originally, or this collection of thing, whatever it was, this Velik, ate other living creatures. What other living creature is going to live on Saturn? These little fly things, how are they going to exist on a planet made up of freezing cold hydrogen and helium, travelling at speeds of 1,000 miles an hour? Even if it could, how then would it be transported safely from Saturn to Earth and be able to survive? It wouldn't. Look at things that live deep underwater, like your anglerfish or your squids. The change in pressure from underwater there to the surface of planet Earth is minuscule compared to the changes in conditions that you'd experience going from Saturn to Earth. This is why I didn't like the Saturn thing, because it just ruins my immersion. This thing would not exist. It just doesn't make any logical sense. So it eats living things that apparently live on Saturn, which wouldn't. And then the Visser has transformed it or mutated it so that it can eat engine energy. Right. How he did that is a question. But he's made it hone in on morphing energy. So we've established logically from that morphing gives off its own unique energy. Now, I don't remember much, but maybe that's covered again in the future. But that is it's a funny point, that. And yeah, maybe that gets covered again. But anyway, that's the Velik, this weird thing that makes a sort of a brack noise, as it's described in the book, and shreds down trees and houses and looks somewhat like a tornado. Nobody apparently... This thing was tearing down houses in suburban areas, and maybe a few people said, "Oh, that's a funny looking tornado." Apparently most people just... whatever, it's Animorphs. I suppose in a way it's not meant to make sense. Just quickly jumping back to the mutated life form thing. When Axe is taken aboard the ship later in the book, he confronts Visser 3, who said that he's mutated this Velik so that it goes after morphing energy and feeds off engine energy. What does Axe say then? He says something along the lines of, only the Yerks would think it clever to mutate other life forms. How long has this guy been living on Earth? We're humans. Do you know how often we mutate other living life forms? Every day, scientists in labs will mutate fruit flies, mice, sometimes larger animals, fish, lots of invertebrates, bacteria, viruses, probably stem cells as well, which are part of us. We mutate life every single day. Even back then, DNA was still a thing that we were able to work on. When was DNA discovered? Mid-1900s or something like that. So DNA was still a growing thing, but still we mutated things every day. So Michael and Catherine, who wrote this book, do your research, please. For Axe to say to Vista-3, only the Yerks would be evil enough to mutate other life forms. You live on a fucking planet where it's done every single day, non-stop. For beauty products, sometimes. So if Axe thinks he's getting one over on Vista-3, then he's not going about it the right way. Right, next point. So rewinding back a bit from that point, Rachel hits her head on a tree while she's in her eagle morph because she's chasing after Tobias for whatever reason. I think she sees Axe at some point, I don't know. And she hits a tree. Now what we've established in Animorphs to this point is that injuries that take place in morph are not translated back into your own body. This rule is completely done away with here. Just gone. She hits her head in eagle morph and collapses. And when she comes back, she's a human, but she has amnesia. Now you could say that this is maybe because she fell unconscious mid-morph and something weird happened. It's possible, but it just seems reading this that she hit her head while she was an eagle, and she maintained amnesia while she was human. That does not make sense in light of the Animorphs lore. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. That's not how... Unless there is some weird exception that's never explained, this does not make sense. At this point, after the whole Darlene thing where Marco's acting out of character and Rachel bumps her head in eagle morph and has amnesia as a human, it felt to me like this was parody. This was... I read it and I asked on the Discord, are we sure this wasn't ghost written? Because it's just broken so many laws of Animorphs within like the first 50 pages that it felt like a parody. It didn't feel like Animorphs. And it was a struggle to make myself read the rest of it. But I did, and as we carry on, it got a bit better, I will admit. But at this point, it was pretty dreadful. So Rachel stumbles away, finds a woman in a hut somewhere who likes to collect clothes and yell insane nonsense. Catherine has previously said that this is her in the morning without coffee, I think, when she's just woken up. And there are people that theorise that it's the woman that was released or freed in book 1, which I don't buy that theory because it seems obvious from the way this character is portrayed that she's been insane for quite a while. And it's only been, what, a couple of months since book 1? 2 or 3 months? I get that feelings about that time. I don't think that woman would be to that stage within that time frame. So I'm sorry, I don't buy the theory that that woman is the same woman that was released in book 1. We have a few scenes where this Velik is chasing the Animorphs, each as they're morphing. And I think Axe is the first to realise what's happened as he's taken up to Vista-3's ship, because it doesn't want to kill the Animorphs. It grabs them, takes them up to Vista-3 and drops them in a ship for the treat of getting some engine fuel energy, whatever. We've discussed that. So Axe is taken... Oh no, whoa. Let's just hold on there a second. Just something that I have not yet pointed out, that I should have pointed out a long time ago, but kept forgetting. Knees, right? These things... Here. Jesus Christ. There. Oh. I hate getting old. Ow. Right. Knees. On dogs, right? They have homologous leg structures to us. That means that basically they're near enough the same, bar some adjustments here and there, a few changes, and obviously the external stuff. The legs do not have to, the knees do not have to bend backwards. What they're obviously trying to get here is when you look at a dog and the back leg. Have I got a picture somewhere? Right, thank you, number 21, the threat. These bits here, that's the dog's leg. The knee is here. It bends the same way that a human knee bends. This is the heel. That is not the knee. The knee on a human does not have to bend backwards to make the heel. The thing is about humans, the heel is on the floor. We are flat-footed. Dogs stand on their toes and their heel is off the ground. So, it's been about 5 times now where it's been mentioned that the knee has to bend backwards. Not true. Catherine started this book series about educating kids about animals. She needed to do a little bit more research. Sorry, Catherine. Oh, I'm just going to put this book back here. Sorry, Catherine. But you have led young minds astray with your false anatomy. But you've done a lot more in benefits than you have in the negative, so I'm obviously going to let you off on these minor bits. Just study some more anatomy, please. And just another point to add to that, it's something I would have come up with later. Tigers don't roar. They sort of growl a bit to mark their own territory and talk to, well, not talk obviously, but communicate to other tigers. But tigers do not roar, especially when they're attacking their prey. It just doesn't happen. So, yeah, another thing where the animal facts are not quite there. But never mind, let's carry on with the plot. Axe is taken up to see Visser 3. And it becomes clear from Axe's perspective that there is almost an unwritten rule, it might be written, I don't know, amongst the Andalites, that if somebody murders somebody, somebody else from that family has to get revenge by murdering the murderer. And unless that's just a warrior thing in the Andalite military, but eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth thing is obviously very prevalent in Andalite society. And we've only just started to get these little glimpses of Andalite culture, and the next book, which is going to be book 8, will explore that a bit further. And I'm very interested to relearn Andalite culture and the culture of other races. But we're already getting the sense that Andalites are very, almost traditional, what we would call traditional values from, like, I don't know, the beginning of human time till the 90s. Because human attitudes have changed over the last 30 years, sometimes for the better, a lot of times for the worse. But the Andalites seem to be, they would probably vote Republican, just put it that way, they'd probably vote Republican. So Visser 3 explains the Velik to Axe. This is the first time we hear all that information about the Velik. And he also says something rather unusual. He says that the Animorphs, or what he considers to be the Andalite bandits, are terrorists. And at first I thought, oh, that's unusual use of the word terrorism. And I thought maybe it would be a one-off. But then the next scene, we have Cassie and she's in the mall. Because obviously Jake and Marco think, right, we're going on a dangerous mission here. Cassie, you go to the mall and look around the shops. Of course, Cassie thinks, oh my, they must be sexist or something like that. No, Cassie, it's because you're a fucking liability. But that's for another time. Right, so Cassie's in the mall and she sees Chapman, who I still think is Bryan Cranston in my head. It's a wonderful idea and everyone should run with that. Cassie follows Chapman, thinking that maybe he would lead to clues about Rachel. And he does give us some information about the Velik. Remember earlier I told you where we learned something and in the very next chapter we learn it in a slightly less entertaining way. This is one of those examples. But in the midst of this, we also get Chapman talking about the Animorphs, or the Andalite bandits. And he also labels them as terrorists twice. Or was it thrice? It was one of the two. But it's happened enough within the space of like 2 chapters that we know that the Yeerks are calling the Andalites terrorists. They do not fit the definition of terrorists. You've got to be very, very lenient on the definition of terrorist to even think about including the Animorphs. But they're not. Terrorism. Fear, causing fear by violence or intimidation, usually on civilian populations, in order for political gain. The Animorphs do not really do that. Firstly, the Yeerks are an invasive force, so they aren't civilians. They're a military. The only way that I can see that it potentially being terrorism is taking into account that the Yeerks think that these are Andalites, so they're not the species or race being invaded, which would almost give them a justification. I don't think they would really be terrorists. But if there were civilian Yeerks on Earth, why would there be civilian Yeerks on Earth? They've been invaded for, 2 years or something like that? Why would they have civilians there? I mean, potentially they could. They could potentially have civilians there. But you're an invasive force, you're a military. You don't really count as civilians. What political gain do they get from it? Nothing. They get military gain by destroying the Candrona or attacking the Yeerk pool. That's the military. It's not terrorism. But think about it this way. Now, I don't think the authors would do it this way, because remember, this is a kid's book, and I don't think they'd have gone this deep. But maybe it's a propaganda campaign spread by the Visser, because the Visser says it, and it's almost like in tandem, the other, like the high-ranking Yeerks, like Chapman, are also saying the same thing. The Animorphs, or the Andalite bandits, are terrorists. It almost sounds like there's been a propaganda campaign going on behind the scenes for the Yeerks. Like they're trying to rile up the subordinates and the regular Yeerk by saying, you're under threat by terrorists. You've got to keep your eyes open and you've got to, I don't know, attack them where you see them or whatever. But there may be little games going on in the background amongst the Yeerks, like little bits of propaganda. It's possible. It is possible. So I'm not going to criticise the use of the word terrorist here because of these exceptions that I've listed. Your thoughts in the comments would be very much appreciated. Now we get away from the crap part of the book and we start to get into the second half where things become very entertaining. There's the trash can part, which I will say in the UK version is translated to rubbish bins. It doesn't quite roll off the tongue quite the same way. Do you not like rubbish bins? Do you not like trash cans? But yeah, they get that scene where Marco. I mean, let's think about this, right? Driving a car isn't that difficult. The only way it becomes difficult is with a gear stick. Now that's what we have in Europe and in the United Kingdom. To you states people out there, cars over here are more difficult than they are over there because we've got a gear stick to contend with. We have to drive manual. Americans are lazy shits who don't have that. All they've got to do is that. And they still get it wrong, according to this. At least he wasn't a woman driver. Oh shit, I'm going to get banned now. But that was a very entertaining bit. And they've established quite quickly that morphing takes his attention. Because Axe and Marco came out of the blade ship, they fell down. Oh my god, there was a stupid part. I've got to go back to it. Right, so there's Axe is being lifted towards the blade ship by the Velik. It's the other way around. So Axe is in there, Marco's being lifted up there because he crashed into Rachel, who was an elephant morph, and the Velik was there. Velik takes Marco up. God, what was it? No. I'm trying to remember it in my head. It was so fucking stupid. Right. So Visser 3 is looking through cameras of the bug fighters and what have you. And he's looking at this. And you'd think this is the most important part of this mission. We have 3 of them there. And we have our bug fighters closing in, whatever. We've got to keep our eye on this. What should the Visser do at this stage? What should he do? I mean, there's a few things he could do. What should he not do? Retreat to his fucking quarters! What are you doing, you absolute pile of shite? The most important part of all this, and what do you say? I'm going to get my fucking head down for a bit. Fuck off. This guy is a prick. He should be sacked immediately. Immediately. Well, there should be a fucking mutiny on that ship, because he's also killed some poor sod of a Hork-Bajir and some poor sap of a Taxon. My God, it's worse than Jake's leadership in this book. It's... This guy should be arrested. I mean, there's bound to be some reasonable yerks out there who turn around and say, this is a dereliction of duty. You have put your entire crew at risk. You've abandoned your duty at the most essential time to go off and fucking get your head down. This guy would be court-martialed in a second. In a second. Not even that, a millisecond. Oh, I'm just so angry at Visser 3 right now. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Right. So Marco and Axe escape from the Blade Ship. They fall. And we get the whole trope, cliche of last minute saving. Twice in the space of 2 chapters. So Axe and Marco manage to morph just in time to glide over the tarmac. Woohoo! Something that only happens in movies. And it's either the scene directly before or directly after where Cassie and Rachel are flying in their Hornell. They're flying towards Hork-Bajir, who are just going to slice them up. And then at the very last second, Jake comes along and knocks one of the Hork-Bajir over. The other one's also distracted, so they get away. There's 2 examples of this saved at the last minute trope. And it just felt like, oh, please don't. I can't stand the overused tropes. So that was a bit of a point against the latter half of this book, but whatever. It's had its fun moments. This isn't part of the main series. Whatever. Just whatever. That's this book. It's just whatever. I will say, though, that there's another point against this is, for about, 5 chapters, Rachel and Cassie have been under lock from a couple of bug fighters. We've seen them. The Visser was looking at them through cameras from the bug fighter with clear view of Rachel, Cassie and Marco at that point. Clear view. What do Rachel and Cassie do? Demorph and then morph owl. Even while Rachel is saying, there are bug fighters above us. How were they not caught? How did these bug fighters that were there the whole time not look down and say, that elephant just turned into a human, and then that human then turned into an owl. Knowing morphing technology, these are clearly humans. I reckon they called themselves Animorphs, because it's a portmanteau of animal and morphers. Case closed. But no, apparently the bug fighters just said, look the other way. See nothing here. Oh look, now they're a fucking owl. Great. Let's send the Hork-Bajir down. And during this bit, when Marco is being taken away, Cassie had a moment of cowardice. Cowardice. And I cheered. Because I thought, fucking finally, this character has some character. Cassie has developed character development. And it was great. Finally, this character has a flaw. And not something you walk on, an F-A-L-A-W, a flaw. Foxtrot Lima Alpha Whiskey, flaw. No. We meet up later on, and she says to herself, I'm such a coward. And then all the other Animorphs are like, no, you're not. And she's like, oh no, I'm not. And she seems immediately redeemed, and she comes up with the plan, and she executes the plan herself, and it's Cassie who saves the day. Character development! On Star Wars bloody Rey Skywalker level character development, where for a split moment she has an interesting character flaw, but then the very next scene she overcomes that flaw and is more powerful than ever before. Fucking hell, Cassie, please stop. Please, just... I don't like Cassie at this point. At first, I was saying, yeah, she will develop. And I know she will develop into a more interesting character, but at this stage, it's just becoming overbearing. This character has no flaws, and when she does get flaws, she instantly redeems them. Like the next chapter, not only does she redeem them, but she excels in her new character perfection. And it's just, fucking stop, please. I will say one thing about it, though. Remember in book 4 where she had the whole thing about, I shouldn't be acquiring dolphins, it's not ethical. And then she does it, and then at the end she says, well, it's okay, because I did it for the right thing. So this problem has been overcome, and I shall never think about this again. What do we get in this book? I don't want to acquire the whale because it just feels unethical. I think, fucking hell, Cassie, have you got the memory of a fucking goldfish? You melter! You've overcome that problem. Maybe that's her flaw. She's got no memory. And she just keeps reliving the same problems over and over again. This book, right? So the Velik is killed because it hit water. And I found it entertaining. I am moaning a lot. But there is a lot to moan about in this book. But there's also a lot to celebrate. The latter half of the book has some great moments. It is a bit of a roller coaster. Someone described it as almost like a feature film version of Animorphs. And it isn't part of the main series. It's called Megamorphs. I get the feeling that it was the authors saying, let's just write whatever the fuck we want. Why not? We're 7 books in. We're starting to get a good fan base. Let's just write fucking whatever. And that turned into Megamorphs. So they wrote some really good stuff, but they also wrote some stuff that should probably be left in the rubbish bins of history. Jake's leadership, well, there was nothing pretty spectacular, and in the end, Cassie was the hero who came up with the winning plan because she's Cassie and she's perfect. And he just didn't discipline anyone. And it's been going on for so long now that I've got to deduct 2 points from what would be the average. So 5 out of 10 for Jake. Nothing drastic, but just some pathetic leadership in there. Yeah, tempted for a 4, but 5's fair. The book itself, the first half is a 3 because it was shit. The second half is about a 7 or an 8. So I'm going to give it a 6. A low 6, but a 6 nonetheless. So Animorphs, Megamorphs 1, The Andalite's Gift, is a 6 out of 10. Entertaining in parts, but it doesn't really add anything, and some of the stuff in there is just downright egregious. And I know I gave The Stranger a 6 as well. I preferred The Stranger to this one, so The Stranger sort of a higher 6. So it is the worst book so far. It definitely had some of the worst bits so far. Definitely. But the second half I read all in one go, which says something for this book. It does have entertainment value as soon as you get past the first 50 to 100 pages or so. That's the Andalite's Gift. There are more Megamorphs to come, but the next book in our review series is our first axe-led one, and now he actually has a picture, which looks like it's been rushed. But this is going to be a very interesting book, and I'm looking forward to reading this one. So please join me next time for our review of Animorphs number 8, The Alien. Thank you for watching this review, and ta-ra!